Right now on Money Matters Today. Divorce. It doesn't have to be the knockdown, drag-out fight to the bitter end. Couples have been finding a more civil tone. Today, the pros and cons of collaborative divorce. Paul McCartney is a legend in the music world. Now, he could be paying a legendary sum of cash to his wife, Heather, who wants out of the marriage. After 4 years of bliss, she stands to get millions. How this case could set a new precedent in divorce court. Coming up. Money Matters Today starts right now. Personal finance, saving, investing. It's your money. This is CN8 Money Matters Today. And now host, Mary Caracoli.
Welcome to CN8 Money Matters. If you have a rocky marriage, today's show may encourage you to take another stab at working things out. We're talking divorce. It not only drains your emotions, but it takes a toll on your finances. Getting us started is Lynne Gold Bikin. She is the chair of the family law practice at Wolf Block. She has also been named one of the top 10 divorce attorneys in the U.S. by Worth Magazine. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
We see so many high-profile cases about divorce right now, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the Paul McCartney-Heather Mills fiasco that is going on. After 4 years of marriage, it seems like there's a lot of money at stake in that relationship.
There is indeed, and you would think that someone like Paul McCartney would have gotten a prenuptial agreement to protect what he had when he came into the marriage, but apparently he was so happy in his first marriage, he assumed that everything would go well in his second, and that was not to be.
Yeah, 4 years later, filing for divorce. Now, there's so many different reports out there, but when we talk about them, I want to look at them in terms of how this works. They're in London, we're in the United States. Things are a little bit different, of course. But they're saying now her leverage in this case is that he wants this to be a very private divorce proceedings, have things over with, keep things amicable, and her leverage right now is to be public, to go public, to try to get as much money out of him as possible. What kind of strategy is that?
Well, it's a good strategy from her point of view, but if I were him, I would say, fine, I made a nice offer to you, the offer is now off the table, the meter is running backwards, let's see how much money it's going to cost you to get money from me, because it's going to take a long time, hon.
How would you advise your client, if you were representing Paul McCartney in this situation, to deal with the fact that something is getting really ugly?
Well, the first thing I would say is don't negotiate against yourself. If you've made an offer of whatever it is, I think 90 million was the number that we heard, and she says no, I wouldn't up it, because every time you up it, she says no, because you'll put more on the table. So my answer would be, that's my offer today, tomorrow it's 89 million, and the day after it's 88 million, and but after that it's 80 million, and by the time we get down to 50 million, let's see where you are. And how much is it going to cost you to get it? And by the way, you don't look too good. I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be really sympathetic to 4 years of marriage for 90 million. Not bad. Yeah,
it's a pretty good deal, and by anyone's standards. It's not always the rich guy and the not as rich woman, and as we see in this case. We have Jessica Simpson, right, the pop star, with a pop star, soon-to-be ex-husband, Nick Lachey, and he's the one who's going
right
after the money.
Right, and unfortunately for a man, it's really more embarrassing, because most judges don't feel too sympathetic for the guy who's going after the poor woman, which really isn't fair. You know, you should be able to say to the judge, Judge, close your eyes, forget who's which is on which side, let's be fair here. It doesn't always work that way.
But if you are representing Nick in this case, and we're back at American courts now, so you'd have a little more say of what would happen, what would you advise him to do? Because he was in the marriage and this money was earned during the marriage.
I'd say go for 50-50 and take it. You know?
And even if that's not being offered?
Well, even if it's not, it should be offered, because in California, it's, you know, it's a state where they just whack everything down the middle, and he's entitled to that. And I think if he goes to court, he's going to get it. So she ought to be reasonable, because she's a saleable commodity. You know, for people like her, and even Paul McCartney, money they're just going to keep making it again. So how much do you want to squeeze your kishkas here? You know, pay it and get on with your life and go make more money.
I guess you do have to ask yourself the question, if you are the person with the big pocketbook at that point that's you feel is being attacked, you have to ask yourself, what is your freedom worth at that time?
But on the other hand, when people start getting really greedy, that's when you say, look, I offered you half of what we earned during the marriage. That's fair. More than that, with these kinds of numbers, is not fair. And then somebody's going to get his back up, and he's going to say, you know what? 50-50, or if it's not going to be 50-50, I'd rather pay my lawyer. And I hear that all the time. I'd rather give it to you than to her.
Interesting, and that is what happens, right, as things get nasty. So for real life cases, we're not talking about tens or hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
We're talking about, maybe a nice retirement fund, a house, and some assets. What do we do wrong as couples when we're at that table negotiating that it ends up costing us so much?
Well, the first thing we do is we get greedy, and the second thing we do is we forget that there are children involved, especially in the Paul and Heather case. There's a child involved. The most important thing that a good lawyer can do is saying, once I'm out of the picture, these two people have to work together to raise that child somehow. And if we get them fighting, what's the impact on their child, and what are the priorities here? And the second thing that we as lawyers do that's wrong is we forget whose money it is. And we just keep running and running and running the bill, which is really too bad. The people ought to know what their rights are, what's reasonable, and you know what? They ought to take it. When they let their emotions get involved, then the money goes. It just leaks.
If you feel that you have hired an attorney who is reasonable and who does have your child's best interest at heart and the overall what's best for everyone in this situation. Right. But your soon-to-be ex-spouse has somebody who has more of that keep the meter running mentality. What do you do?
There's not a whole lot you can do. You can sit down with your spouse and say, can we talk about this? And if they say, no, I'm going to get back at you for all the miserable things you did for me, there's not a whole lot you can do except say, fine, you know what, I'll see you in court. And then just prepare as best you can. I think before somebody decides to get a divorce, they ought to pre-plan. They ought to go to a lawyer and say, what is it going to take, what's it going to cost, so that they have a realistic expectation. And then I say go to marital therapy, because even if they can't get back together again, maybe they can get themselves in that mode where they can talk to each other and say, what can we do to make this work, and not pay it all to the lawyers. You're going to be talking about collaborative divorce, and that's a good method. But if you've got somebody who wants to really fight, there's not a whole lot you can do about it.
So do everything in your power to make it something where there is a spirit of cooperation of some sort, especially if there's children involved.
You know, I settle cases. You know, I don't need collaborative divorce to say to the other side, what is it going to take to make this work? Let's put all our discovery on the table, face up, let's try to work it out. But if you've got somebody who's not willing, can't do it.
And I think probably for couples who are maybe having that rocky time right now but aren't quite at the level of, yes, they have to get a divorce, maybe understanding the reality of the financial picture is a great wake-up call.
Right. Work it out. I say, put it on your hands. Whatever it takes will make it work. Stop making big things bigger. Make them smaller and say, we married, we were in love, let's try to get back to that place again.
Good advice, Lynne. Thank you so much.
You.
And of course, I want to hear from you. If you have a question, call or email on the web. CN8.TV interviewer line is 215-952-4902.